Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. Happy holidays, happy Christmas if you celebrate it. This is my last live stream of the year. I won't be doing one next week, so we will be coming back in the new year after this one. I thought I'd end it up with just an open Q&A covering whatever you want to cover, really. We've got a whole load of questions, as always, from my patrons. That will form the structure of what we've got going on. I'm very happy to take any questions from the chat. We'll just see how long we go on for, see what we cover. We've got some questions about Game of Thrones. Then a little bit later on, we're going to move on. We've got a couple of things we want to talk about Lord of the Rings, and then end up with a couple of things about Westworld and the shape of the channel and where we're going, because we've got some big plans about where we're going to be going in the new year. So all of that to come. We're going to be dotting around a little bit today. I think, as is always the way with these open Q&As, I'm basically being led by the questions that you're wanting to be asking. So why don't we start by, well, I'll start actually with Maura Lee. Thank you so much for some very generous super chats before we went live. Maura, just on a personal level, thank you so much. I really appreciate all your support through this year. For me, financially, as well as a friend, and also just for the community as a whole, you really are an absolute star, Maura, so thank you. I really appreciate it. What you've said here is, to Robert, all the mods and everyone in the chat, just want to wish everyone a happy holidays and a happy and healthy new year. Thank you for all the incredible content, live streams and fabulous guests on your channel this year. Here's to more in 2020. And also for all the fabulous stories on the Well-Told Tale. Yeah, just I want to say that for this year, I should probably start out by saying this has been it's been quite a year for me in terms of the channel. This channel has grown beyond my wildest expectations, and I really want to thank everyone who's played a part in that. As I'm on a live stream, I've had so many fantastic guests on this live stream who have just helped bring to life these fantastic stories that we all love. So I'm hugely grateful for them. And I will, I'm sure, be effusive later, as I always am, particularly grateful to my patrons whose support does quite literally allow me to keep on doing this. So thank you all so much. It's been a fantastic 2019 for the channel. Let's dig into, oh, well, just spotted there as we're going past, I'm sure I will dot about all over the place. Mod Mary asking whether I would cover his Dark Materials. I'm actively considering it for next year. This year, a bit too late to that party. I think I'd want to give it proper justice. I love the books. I think the adaptations are fantastic. If you've not seen them, they're on the BBC if you're in the UK, or on Netflix around the rest of the world, and they are fantastic. They've already renewed it for season 2, so I'm actively considering doing that next year. Let's get into questions from my patrons. We're going to start with Game of Thrones questions, A Song of Ice and Fire. As a channel, we've been moving away from thinking just about the show and more to thinking about the Winds of Winter over this last year, what might be coming up in the future. As obviously, there's the possibility of some spin-off shows, but in terms of what's going to be happening in the book. HBO in the US, thank you very much, Misty. It's not on Netflix, it's on HBO. Jigs M saying, I had some questions after your previous video. This is a video I did about Jon's resurrection in the books. This was me trying to work through how it might happen, how it might be different to what happened on the show, and what that might mean for the story going forward. Now, Jiggs says, in your latest video, you mentioned Jon might be resurrected in a funeral pyre. Do you think that there could be a parallel with Dany's dragons hatching in Drogon's pyre? Dany was reborn as the mother of dragons. What would Jon be reborn as? Or what about an icy resurrection for Jon? Now, for anyone who's not watched that video I've done, what I suggested is that this is going to be different. It's going to be the way that Jon's resurrection is going to work is going to be very different in the books. The first reason for that is that just the whole situation in Castle Black is very different to what it was on the show. There's a whole load of people who aren't there, like Davos, for example. He's not at Castle Black. In the show, he was the main person organizing it all, but in the books, he's miles away. And so we get people like Melisandre as well, who is there, but she's not having a crisis of faith, as she was on the show. We get a whole load of factions going on. It's incredibly complicated. We get all of the wildlings. We get the Night's Watch. Queen Selyse, Stannis's wife, is there with her guards as well. And it's an incredibly complicated situation there. And Jon effectively abandons his vows immediately before being killed by the Night's Watch, or some members of the Night's Watch. It's not exactly clear who's involved, but they are doing it very much because he, in their view, has been breaking his vows. So that's the situation we're in. We don't even see all of the people who attack him. The chapter ends and we don't get any more about what happens in Castle Black after that, so we don't know much information. But because it is so complicated, there will immediately, I'm sure there will be a lot of fighting and all the rest of it, but there will be a big debate about what to do about Jon's body. Now, my take, look at the video if you want to go through all of the logic. I think that the consensus view is that, lacking a better idea, it will be stored in the ice cells, which are these literally cells, prisons carved into, carved into the wall. And so his body will be stored there. In that very same chapter, George R. R. Martin reminds us about the ice cells and reminds us that that is where dead Night's Watchmen have been stored, because the fear obviously is that they will rise again as whites. And the ones who were stored there hadn't risen again as whites. So the assumption was that this was a safe place. That's my theory. The second part of the theory is that his spirit, his essence, will walk into Ghost. So actually, the resurrection of Jon is not so much this kind of Melisandre coming and doing her magic, but this is reconnecting his spirit with his body. And the question is, how might that come about? Who might go about doing that? I sort of, as an aside, theorized what would be the most dramatic way for this to happen. And I thought perhaps maybe they eventually did decide to burn his body, and that was the moment at which Jon came back, having been frozen, and was then about to be burned. He then emerges because Jon is this ice and fire figure. He is the hinge through the song of Ice and Fire. He's Stark, he's Targaryen, he's icy, he's fiery. Everything kind of like hinges around him, and so it would make perfect sense if his resurrection has got an element of fire and an element of ice to it. So that's where I'm going with that one. I don't think it will be just a fire resurrection. I don't think it will be just an ice resurrection. I think it will be a bit of both. But for the story, the important thing is what then that means for him. And he will almost certainly, I think, be more wolfish. And I'll allow you to speculate on what that might mean. But I think that his character will undoubtedly be affected by the fact that he spends some time in Ghost, being Ghost. So that's a fantastic first question. Thanks, Jigs. A lot of people are talking about The Witcher. I'm really looking forward to that. I think that's coming out tomorrow. I might be wrong. It might even be today. But it's yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I've read a few of the books. I played one of the games. I love the universe. I decided this time not to cover it, simply because I've been trying to focus in on other things, but I'm just going to watch it and enjoy it as a fan, so I'm really looking forward to that. Ed Pistemic saying, hi, I've binged all your videos and love the depth of your theories. It's great to catch you live for the first time. Welcome. I saw there was someone else also here for the first time in the chat, welcome to you as well. It's fantastic to have new people here in the chat. And Carlos Enrique, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, I don't know if you already made a video about that, but I would like to know your opinion on how Euron's upcoming battle will affect Westeros in the next book. Oh, good question. I haven't made a video on this because it's quite up in the air as far as I'm concerned. I will get to do a video about this at some point. But what I can do is set out the building blocks, the things that we know. The first thing we know is that for Euron, this isn't just a battle about trying to defeat some other navies. That's not what this is about. He has set this up, this battle, for those who need a quick recap. So he, having become the king of the Ironborn, has now got his massive fleet just off the south coast of Westeros, and the next two largest fleets, the Red Wine fleet and the Imperial fleet, they're heading to engage him. And he is, it would appear there are hints that he has been deliberately trying to set the timing of that battle so it's when he wants it. And the timing of it seems to be so that it happens at the same time as the battle over in Slavers Bay, where he sent Victarion over with a view to trying to capture dragons. This ties in with what we see in the pre-release chapters from the Winds of Winter, where Euron has been tying people to the front of his boats, and not just any people, religious people. He's been tying his lover there, who is pregnant with his child, which then makes that king's blood, I guess. And the clear implication is he is attempting to perform a huge, huge bit of magic, which is connected with what's happening over in Slavers Bay, but also probably something to do with what he wants to be doing over in Westeros. Now, Euron's plans are not just limited to conquering Westeros. Yes, he does want to conquer Westeros, but his plans are for him to be, quite literally, a god. That is what he is wanting to be, and not just a god, the god. He wants to sit on the Iron Throne with figuratively the dead bodies of all the gods, other gods, lying out before him, as everybody worships him as the god of the planet. That is what his vision is. He's crazy, and he is trying to do some huge magic in order to try and make this happen. So that's the sort of the focus of what this is, and I think that we quite often just try and think of what is Euron trying to do? Is he trying to take Old Town? Is he going to get a foothold in the Reach? Possibly, but that's not the focus. That's not the main thing he's trying to do. The main thing he's trying to do is get dragons, possibly get Krakens. We don't know about that. That's a lovely theory, but we've got not much evidence for that. And if he gets Old Town, then yes, he might want to try and gain some knowledge there, but also I think that Old Town will burn. This is the imagery that we've got. George R.R. Martin loves sort of taking real history imagery and applying it into his world. And the imagery we've got there is of the Library of Alexandria, which obviously historically did burn down, losing huge amounts of knowledge for humanity. So that's the kind of idea that we've got going on there. But against that, got some questions on this sort of coming up a little bit later, but against that, the Hightowers are there performing their own magic. So basically, I think what I would suggest is stop thinking about this as, I mean, I'm sure you won't anyway, but don't think about this as being just a physical battle. This is now magical. This is a magical battle happening. It will be Euron, and it will be Victarion trying to do a few different things. Moqorro is trying to get in the way over on the far side of the world, and we're going to get the Leighton Hightower trying to stop things happening over in the Reach in Old Town. So that is what the actual focus of all this is. It's the magical battle rather than the physical one. Andrew K, I saw in the chat, picking up a question from Absolute Range, saying, how do you think Aegon and Daenerys' storylines will end? I'm curious how the two will interact. My general take on this, I think I've said this a couple of times. So Aegon, this person who claims to be Aegon VI, the true heir of the Seven Kingdoms, his invasion has already started. They've already come in. They're in the Stormlands, which is very close to King's Landing. There are rumors they're going to Storm's End. If they capture that, that'll be a hugely important and symbolic victory. Storm's End is very hard to capture and very, very old. So if they take that, the next step is that, and they being Aegon, and he's got the Golden Company backing him up, who in the books are impressive, and they will next, I suspect, head towards King's Landing. King's Landing, we've seen in the books that we get Varys, who's undermining the defenses going on there. He kills Kevin Lannister simply because Kevin Lannister is pretty good and effective, and so he thinks, well, we need to get him out of the way, let somebody slightly more rubbish come in and try and govern this city. So I think it seems pretty inevitable that he will take over. Daenerys is still a long way away. Daenerys, as well as being on the far side of the world, is now off in the Dothraki Sea. She's got a whole plot with the Dothraki and getting them to join her side. Then she's got to head all the way back to Meereen. Once she's in Meereen, she's got a huge amount of people that she needs to talk to and negotiate with and all the rest of it. Then head all the way over to Westeros, probably or possibly via a number of places that she will have some sort of a grudge against, places like Yunkai and Astapor and Volantis and all the rest of it. So she will make a slow and steady progress. It will be at least a year of real time before she arrives, by which time Aegon will be already established in King's Landing. So, and I will put all of this in a video at some point. It's quite high on my list of videos to do about the Winds of Winter, because I think this is going to be a huge amount of the plot going forward. So she will arrive, and the hints are that she will, her plot, the hints coming from the House of the Undying, is that she will therefore be in some way unmasking him as not being a true Targaryen. He's probably a Blackfyre. Again, I'll do a video on all of that. So she will have her first fight in trying to capture King's Landing will be against him. That's the first battle. So Cersei, by this point, I suspect, will have retreated away from King's Landing, licking her wounds, and will probably then join up with Euron. So that's how they kind of interact. I suspect that Varys, for example, will die in a similar way that he did on the show by Dragonfire, and I suspect it may well be the same for Aegon. I think that is what is going to be happening. So that is how their things will be interacting, leaving Daenerys somewhere around the end of the Winds of Winter or the beginning of A Dream of Spring. She is then the Targaryen in control of the area around King's Landing. She won't be in control of all of Westeros. She'll be in control of that little area. And that's how she starts to get engaged in the war up north. Okay, good questions, though. Thank you very much for them. I've got a whole load of questions from my patrons all around connected issues with House Dayne, Mira Reed, and the role of Dawn, the sword, and things like that. So I'll quickly go through these the questions, and I'll try and sort of talk around the issue for a while, because it's a fascinating set of subjects. And I've definitely picked up that this is something people do want a video on, is this idea of what's happening with House Dayne, what's the role of the Sword Dawn, things like that. Ali Al-Muhanna says, what role will House Dayne play? Who might wield Dawn? He also asks about what will I think about theories by Order of the Green Hand and whether I'd have them on my stream. I have had the Order of the Green Hand on here a couple of times, I think, actually, on this live. So you might have to go, it was a while ago, so you might have to go back a few months. I think it's just Mary Ellen running the channel now. So I think that in terms of their theories, one thing that I will always say is I think the biggest, or one of the biggest problems that any kind of theorizing community can have is this kind of confirmation bias and just sort of all coalescing around what we think is necessarily the truth. What I highly value are people who try and think outside the box, think at different angles, try and reassess the evidence of what's going on. So I really value that. And that's something that Order of the Green Hand have done. And so I really appreciate that new way of looking at the stories and new angles at coming at stuff. It won't surprise you to know that the theory that they are most known for, I suspect, is N plus A equals J, which is Jon's parents are not who we think they are, but they're actually Ned Stark and Ashara Dayne. It won't surprise you to know I don't agree with that. I've been reasonably clear about that. I've got several videos on what I think is the truth of it, which is Rhaegar and Lyanna had baby Jon. That for me makes sense in terms of the story. It makes sense in terms of the symbolism. It makes sense in terms of what Ned was doing around that time, and it makes sense of the evidence that we do have. So for me, I'm reasonably strong on that one. But as I say, I do appreciate other views on the subject. Well, I just wanted a super chat. I'll come back to these questions about House Dayne, but I can do a quite quick answer to this one. Stephen Rocket, thank you so much, saying, why did Davos deliver onions to the men holed up in Storm's End? Did he think it was a profitable endeavor? Was he paid beforehand? Puns. Yeah, that's a harsh pun. So the short answer is that he thought that it would be profitable for him. There were people who were starving in this. For those who don't know the backstory, this was during Robert's Rebellion, and you had Stannis, who was holed up in Storm's End. Outside it were arrayed the armies of the Reach, House Tyrell, and there was a blockade by the Red Wine Fleet, which is a very big fleet. And so my theory, which I think I'm reasonably confident about, is that actually House Tyrell hadn't really got any great interest in taking Storm's End. They were very happy just playing a political game and just sitting there besieging it for a year or so. But the upshot was that there were men and probably women and maybe children as well inside, starving in Storm's End. They were being besieged. And Davos, who was a smuggler, saw an opportunity to get food to them. And because he was confident in his own abilities that he could get in and back out again without being caught, then he did it. And hey, maybe it wouldn't come to anything. But in reality, yeah, he got his, effectively, yes, got his fingers cut off. But he was knighted, he was given land, he was effectively forgiven for his past crimes. He got huge amounts out of it. And Davos is a clever guy. He would have realized that the potential for that was there to actually make a good home for his family. Let's pick up on, as I say, what we were talking about House Dayne. So Ali Al-Muhanna was asking about the role of House Dayne, who might wield Dawn. Frown Pouch was saying, will Mira, as Ashara, I believe, Ashara's daughter, will she be the Sword of the Morning? as a Dane warrior. We've seen her displaying bravery. Maura Lee says we will see Howland Reed again, and Dawn will play an important role. Who will be wielding Dawn, and what will Mira Reed's role be? So I'll sort of talk around this for a little while. There's a lot of interest in this. In terms of House Dane, yes, they will play an important role. I don't think that's particularly surprising to anyone, but it's more to do. Their biggest role was what happened back at the time of the Tower of Joy and Robert's Rebellion with Arthur Dayne and Ashara Dayne. Going forward, the sword itself, Dawn, heavy on symbolism. Clearly, there's something important going on there. My working theory, many others' working theory, is that Darkstar, who's sort of like this renegade guy from cadet branch of House Dane, he's going to take the sword for himself. He's going to head on over and join up with Aegon and probably join his Kingsguard. That seems to be likely for how it's going to get back into action. Because Aegon, as I say, I think that will end in failure. I think that what we're going to see is that the sword, however, is still going to be in King's Landing, and it will come into use. I don't think I would love it to be Mira. I really would love Mira to be wielding it because she has got this Dane connection. She's technically not a Dane. She is a Reed. Yes, she's got Dane blood running through her and all the rest of it, but she is technically not a Dane. So I don't think that she will be made the sword of the morning in some way. The one thing which it's just a theory, but I'm signed up to this idea that Jon will kill Daenerys in the books. I did a video on this, but well before season 8, I think probably before season 7 as well. The hints are there in the books. This is what's going to be happening. And I suspect, given the fact that this is going to be an echo of the old legends of Azor Ahai, given that that was all about the sword, actually, not just about the characters, it was about the sword. We didn't actually see what happened afterwards. What did Azor Ahai do? He saved humanity, but how? Limited details. Lots of details about what happened with the sword. So I think it's entirely possible that that would be the sword. As I say, it's a theory. We're not far enough in the books to actually build on this anymore because we've not actually seen it yet in the books other than in flashbacks. But it's entirely possible that that is the sword that Jon uses to kill Daenerys. So what will Mira's role be if she's not wielding, if she's not going to be the sword of the morning, if she's not going to be wielding Lightbringer? She will, yes, she will be escorting, as she was on the show, she will be escorting Bran back down to Winterfell. That's her main role. She will also, I suspect, be taking with her a sword that she finds there, a Valyrian steel sword called Dark Sister. This was the sword that Bloodraven had with him at the Wall. We've had confirmation of that. It then disappeared when he disappeared, so he almost certainly took it with him when he went north of the Wall, and it's almost certainly therefore in that cave with him there. If she grabs a sword on the way out, as she did on the show, they kind of lingered on it. This is a thing that they often did on the show when they were doing a nod to something that had happened or was about to happen in the books. They just let the camera linger on something that looked insignificant but could have some implications. She grabbed a sword on the way out of that cave. And I suspect that will be Dark Sister. That will bring one of the two ancestral Targaryen swords back into action. So I think that that is what her main role is going forward. And then there's going to be the link across to the Reeds themselves. Howland Reed, I suspect, will emerge from the neck, and he will head on up and will play a huge part in giving everybody a whole load of the backstory about what happened during Robert's Rebellion and the like. Emily Nielsen, thank you so much for the super chat. That's very kind. Let's have a quick flick through the chat, see if there's any quick questions I can answer in there. Shannon 0893 saying, I wonder if the Sword of the Morning, Morning, is actually the Sword of the Morning, Mourning, and the original title got lost over time since they're homophones. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, and I think that I thought something similar, but it's, if it is, and I know some people have speculated that it is the original Lightbringer, then that is the sword which Azor Ahai used to kill his lover, Nissa. And so, yes, it would be a sword of mourning, because he did forge this sword which helped win the battle, but it was at great personal cost. So, yeah, that's entirely possible. Nicola Juracan saying, was Ashara's death faked, and could she appear in the books? I believe her death was faked. I will come on to that in my next video on my Robert's Rebellion Tower of Joy series. I've got about 3 more left in that series, and we will definitely finish that off in the first couple of months of next year. Yeah, so she as a character allegedly threw herself off of the highest tower in Starfall, but they never found her body. So it's the kind of thing that's very suspicious. Could she appear in the books? I think that she is currently in the Neck Greywater Watch with Howland Reed, and so I think it's entirely possible that she may appear in the books. I don't think she's going to have a hugely pivotal role. I think she's going to remain one of those characters that everybody endlessly theorizes about, but actually doesn't appear huge amounts. Yeah, that's a good question. Sir Darkstar saying, any chances for Darkstar to travel north to serve Jon in case he has a vision of some sort? Possibly. I think I think it's entirely, for me, it makes more narrative sense for him that he is very bitter, that what he would want to be doing is making a name for himself in the way that Arthur Dayne did, being a member of the King's Guard. And I think that the kind of the narrative balance there works well for him to be going across to be serving Aegon, as part of his King's Guard. And I think they would love that, having this a Dayne there to recreate this classic King's Guard that Aerys II had. Whether you actually consider them a classic King's Guard is another matter entirely. Okay, let's have a sort of related question from No Scar saying, hi Robert, do you think George R.R. Martin will give readers the full backstory on the Danes and what really goes on in the High Tower? So on the Danes, yeah, I think we'll get a bit more. In terms of the full backstory, I think we've got a reasonable amount of it already. The one potential missing link is that bit of speculation about what the Sword Dawn was. Was it the original Lightbringer? If it was, then that's just a bit of a link there. But in terms of the history over the last few thousand years, I think we're reasonably clear on what that is. The other bit, again, I'll get onto my my next video in my Robert's Rebellion series, is their role in supporting what was going on at the Tower of Joy, because I think they were pivotal in that. When I had Joe Magician on here a few weeks ago, we talked around this quite a bit, actually. It makes the most sense for the fact that House Dayne were not just a couple of people who happened to be closely connected to Rhaegar, but if this is a tower in the middle of the mountains, which it was, it will need to have been provisioned in some way. And for that, you need to have people bringing food and blankets and all the rest of it. The most logical house to be doing that is House Dayne. So I think that is a bit of information that we will also get out at some point. And then what it is that Ned did that actually made them honor him with naming their heir after him, because that's what happened. Incidentally, that's that's, I think, one of the strongest kind of random bits of evidence to suggest that this wasn't Ned and Ashara who had baby John, because why on earth would they name their child after Ned, their heir after Ned, which is something you'd only do if you think that somebody's a fantastic person. If the person who you're naming them after fell in love with Ashara Dayne and then abandoned her, and she committed suicide out of distress over it, that's not the kind of thing that you would do there. He did some great service to House Dayne, and I will cover this in my next video, but that is the a strong bit of evidence for what actually happened, I think. And second part of that, No Scar, was about what's really going on in the Hightower. I think that might be... it wouldn't surprise me if we don't get a POV from the Hightower's perspective, so we might not know exactly what's going on there, but we will probably see the impact of it. So I think we will see some magic-y stuff happening, emanating from the Hightower, some defensive stuff for Old Town, perhaps, and I think that the clear implication will be there. The bit that I'm tempted by as a theory, I've not investigated yet, is that we get this when we're talking about Aegon, we hear about him having friends in the Reach. Now, that's a really interesting question, because it's like, why would you? Who? Surely they would have come out in the open at some point. Who is it who's in the Reach? Doesn't seem to be House Tyrell. They don't seem to be supportive. The Hightowers are the next most obvious option. The Hightowers do get involved in politics and all the rest of it. They've got a strong history of this, particularly in the Dance of the Dragons, as I'm sure we will see in the spin-off House of the Dragon. But House Hightower get very involved in the politics of the Seven Kingdoms, and for them to be just sort of sitting there minding their own business doesn't seem right. They presumably, given that George R. R. Martin has given them this huge background, we are going to see something more from them, not just they're sitting in a high tower doing a little bit of defensive work. They've got a plan, and we just need to see what that plan is. Marvin Martin, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, go through all this just to have a lifetime king elected by the elites and just assume it will all go well for everyone. Yes, that's a reference presumably to Bran being elected king. I mean, I think that if we just take the show idea, then yes, that's not actually a huge difference. The king of the Seven Kingdoms was always whoever the most powerful people decided it was. We might have this great noble idea of the Targaryen succession that the next in line inherited. The next in line, certainly for the first half, if you look at Fire and Blood Part 1, most of the time the next in line didn't inherit, or there were huge debates about who the next in line actually was. The idea that there was this clear succession is not right. The person who became king was whoever the most powerful people in that land backed, and that was exactly the same as what happened at the end of season 8. The most powerful people in the land at that time were the Starks, and if you just look at that scene where they have great council of however many lords, if you just look around there, you see how Stark have just stacked the odds already. They go for a vote, but who's voting on this? Well, you've got Bran himself, you've got Sansa, you've got Arya, you've got Brienne, who was sworn to Sansa, we've got Sam, who's got strong links there, we've got what looks like another Northern Lord going on. When you start adding all of these different characters together, you see, actually, you know what? They've already got a majority. This is just, it was a sham election of somebody. The Starks were deciding who was going to be winning. and who was going to be king. No one else was, because the Starks had the power. So was that a big change? Not really. The only big change was that they said this isn't hereditary anymore, but still the most powerful people still got to choose. And it's just that this time they chose somebody who had a lot of magical powers going on. So that's what's going on. Turbo, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, are there any holidays in Westeros or Essos? Yeah, so they have, well, they have name days, but they also, they obviously don't have like Christmas and Easter, but they do have midwinter festivals and midsummer festivals and things like that. So yes, there are these kind of things that go on, but because the season's a little bit out of whack, they don't seem to have a kind of like on such and such a date in the year is a thing. It's more of a kind of a celebration of an attempt. Derek Watson, thank you so much. Your thoughts on the book Night King? Is he a currently off-screen character or Euron, Stannis, Jon, Bloodraven? Okay. So first of all, for those who aren't aware, there's the Night King character as such on the show either doesn't exist or certainly hasn't appeared yet in the books. George R. R. Martin makes a clear distinction whenever he's talking about, my Night's King or the show's Night King. The Night King was a character created by the showrunners. It would appear in order to give them a kind of like a central character who they could show the creation of the White Walkers and who they could like make as like the visual baddie. The Night's King in the books is this ancient, legendary character, the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, who went bad, and he, it would appear, fell in love with a female other, and then basically took over or turned the Night's Watch or certainly the Night Fort and made this a place of sacrifice to the others. And this led to a huge battle. We have this Brandon the Breaker and legends about the use of the Horn of Winter and giants rising from the ground and all the rest of it. So that is a legend, something that happened a long, long time ago. Probably not in exactly that way, but something along those lines happened. Might there be an equivalent of a leader of the others in the books? Yeah, it's possible. It's entirely possible. In the books, we know very, very little yet about the others. We kind of assume that they're just like the show White Walkers, but actually in the books, we've not been given huge amounts of information about them. So they are this huge mystery. As I say, it's possible that they will have some kind of a leader. I don't think that the character will be called the Night King. I don't think it's going to be the exact same way. I don't think it's just a matter of stabbing the Night King and everybody else disappears. I don't think that's how it's going to happen. But the others at the moment, the way that they're being presented, may well change in the next book. They're being presented as sort of a mass of mysterious things rather than one character and others in a kind of a supporting role. That's the kind of the way George R. R. Martin is playing it, rather than and that in a way adds to the fear because we don't understand them. The moment that we get the Night King, immediately you start to question what are his motives, what is he about, why is he doing certain different things. The others as a whole, we don't understand any of them. We don't understand their structure or anything like that. Agree Weirwood saying having a Night King in the show was a way to express a concept that they didn't understand enough to write about. They couldn't write a hive mind, so they put in a Night King. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective. Shannon T saying, I think having the one Night King in the show was a smart plan for marketing purposes. Yeah, I think it's a lot easier to have a leader of a group, you'll see what happened. They did this a lot. It's quite a staple thing in shows like this, is that if you have a group of people, you have a figurehead for them who you can understand the person a little bit more, and therefore they represent the whole. So the Golden Company wasn't just the Golden Company. We had Harry Strickland, who was this leader person, and they showed close-ups of his face and all the rest of it. Then you get the Dothraki. Even so later on, you would get the same Dothraki person who was leading it. You would get the Unsullied. We have the leader there, obviously. All these different armies, you would have a leader. Grey Worm, sorry, you'd have a leader for all of these, who, even if the great mass of them are nameless as far as we're concerned, we have a leader that we can sort of focus in on. That's as I say, it's sort of a TV trope. It's a thing that they do a huge amount of, and so it makes sense that they did the same for the White Walkers. Krista Eriksson, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, do you see Summerhall or events tied to it having much significance later in the story? Oh, good question. Okay, so Summerhall was a palace. Again, background for those who are not aware, was a palace that the Targaryens had, sort of on the border with Dorne. And this was where Aegon V, who is Egg from the Dunk and Egg stories, when he grew up and he became the king, this was where he was when he was apparently trying to do some great magic thing to bring dragons back to hatch dragon eggs. And it all went terribly wrong. And there was this huge fire, and lots of Targaryens died. Dunk died, Egg died, and so on. And the flip side of that is that at that point, we actually get Rhaegar was born there. So you could argue a dragon was hatched, was born. Now, what that, the impact of that for the story seems to be that Rhaegar kept on going back to Summerhall. This was the place that he was born. He was sort of haunted by it. And reading between the lines, it seems to suggest that while he was there, he met the Woods Witch, who'd given this original prophecy all about the prince that was promised, and that they would come from this line of Targaryens. Who later became the Ghost of High Heart. So that fired up Rhaegar's prophetic zeal, and that led to him doing the things that he did. That, for me, is the main role of Summerhall. There are theories out there that perhaps what was going on was slightly deeper, and will have some, when the huge fire happened, and will have some kind of implications later on. I think at the moment that's still largely speculation. I mean, I may do a video on Summerhall at some point, but I think at the moment the key thing that we have here is that this is the spiritual home of Rhaegar, and this is where he got his prophetic zeal from. So that's the main role, sort of thematically, for Summerhall in these stories. Let's have a quick flick through. Saying Layla Azmi Gushi saying Summerhall and Summerhall and Winterfell seem to be related. Rhaegar born at Summerhall and Lyanna at Winterfell. Harrenhal in the middle. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting kind of like balance. So obviously Rhaegar and Lyanna come together, and where they met was Harrenhal, and you get summer, winter, and Harren. I don't know, but the Harrenhal and that area a few miles around Harrenhal that has the Isle of Faces, it has the crossroads. That area is the thematic center of this story. It's where so many different things happen. If you ever look at what happened at the Inn of the Crossroads, huge amounts of decisions are made there that impact on the story. When you get to Harrenhal, obviously you get the tourney at Harrenhal is there. The Isle of Faces is where the Pact was, hugely important in the history of Westeros. And I think we will find that rather than the sort of the important places on the show, the important places for the end game are Winterfell and King's Landing. I think we'll find the Isle of Faces and Harrenhal and that area around the middle of the Riverlands. That is going to be the focus of the sort of the battles, and the denouement of the story is going to happen around there, because that is thematically the center of the world and of the story. Epistemic, quick question saying, why do you suppose George R. R. Martin has created the Faith of the Seven with no apparent power at all, when all the other religions seem to be based on real power? Yeah, so George R. R. Martin, his views on religion within A Song of Ice and Fire, we're never going to see the gods. And so all religions are, to some extent, we're cut off from the concept of whether or not the gods actually exist. They're nothing to do with this story. The Faith of the Seven does have some hints. I should probably just pick up some hints that there are some bits of power involved there. When you get the elder brother, you get the healing powers going on the Quiet Isle, that kind of thing. So there are some hints that we've got a little bit of power going on there. But I think that what he wanted was to create a religious structure that sort of just resembled political power more than anything else. That seemed to be what he was wanting to show. And a lot of the other sort of faiths and gods, you get Euron mocks them. We don't see them because they're a lot smaller. They're all the way over in Essos. Euron mocks them about how little impact they had, when they were crying out to their gods, or they were crying out to him when he was raiding them, because their gods could not protect them. So when we think about the gods, it's not that all of the gods except for in the Faith of the Seven are powerful. It's just that we have got a few that do seem to be connected to power, but whether that's because they're coming from the gods or just because they're tapping into the way that magic works in that world is that's another question entirely. We had a couple of super chats. Thank you so much. Will Moss, thank you. Saying, what words did Brienne call out to stop Lady Stoneheart hanging her? What is her plan on summoning Jaime? And what will happen with Brienne, Jaime, and Stoneheart? What will it mean for the story overall? Okay. So Lady Stoneheart, it's been a while since I've read the Brienne chapters, so I'm searching my memory for this one. But Lady Stoneheart in the books she's taken over the Brotherhood Without Banners, or some of it anyway, and she's basically on this revenge mission to try and get anyone who's been against, and when I say get, kill anyone who's been wronging her family. She captures Brienne, and Brienne is basically tied up with a noose. She cries out, I think, the word, in order to stop it, because she does seem to escape from it, the word sword. Basically, she's told, sword or noose, are you going to join me or are you going to be killed? She's saying that she's going to join her, so she's heading off to try and get Jaime. So this is a ruse from Brienne to try and bring Jaime back in, also to try and save Podrick, who was there and really definitely didn't deserve to die. So what will happen, I think what we'll see is that Brienne has a plan that we've not yet seen the depths of, so I'm not going to speculate exactly on what's going to happen there, but I think that Jaime, her idea is to try and convince Lady Stoneheart that Jaime actually is trying to protect the Stark children. And I think that this is going to tie it all in together. Whether or not that actually works, I do not know. But Jaime will escape from there, certainly. There will be a symmetry, is my best guess about where we're going to be at. Where we had right back early on in the story, Jaime was the prisoner of Catelyn Stark, and she released him on his word of honor that he was going to be effectively trying to protect her children. And then Jaime's passed this on to Brienne. And so what they are going to have to do is convince her that Jaime is still trying to do this. So that's where they're trying to go with that story. The issue is quite how crazy Lady Stoneheart is and whether or not she's going to actually buy into it. Natalie Bourdet, thank you so much, saying, hi, Robert, about the Blackfyre sword. Do you think the Golden Company will gift it to Aegon? What's your opinion on its appearance? Thanks a lot for the content. Well, you're very welcome. Okay, so good question. I talked a little bit earlier about Dark Sister and said that this was one of the 2 ancestral swords that House Targaryen had. The other, the greater sword, the one that was generally passed down from king to king, was called Blackfyre. And the whole Blackfyre rebellion was because one king gave it to one of his bastard children because he was a better fighter, and some people saw this as perhaps being the king saying, well, this person should be king because they've got the sword Blackfyre. Huge splits and all the rest of it. What happened to that sword is a little bit murky, but I did a video ages ago about what happened to Blackfyre and Dark Sister, and it was a guy called Bittersteel had it, was his name, Aegor Rivers, I think. He kept the Golden Company. The Golden Company are not just a sellsword company. They are basically disgruntled, or they were originally disgruntled rebels who were loyal to the Blackfyres and the Blackfyre rebellion, and they were, while they were waiting for the next rebellion, the next chance to kick out the Targaryens, they were just sort of kicking around in Essos, being a sellsword company. So that's what they were. They, over time, they've sort of descended away from that. That's not what their main raison d'etre is anymore. However, the link there is very strong, and that is why they are supporting Aegon, who probably, as I said, is a Blackfyre. That's why they're supporting him in his invasion attempt of Westeros. Where Blackfyre fits into all of this is that Bittersteel was the last person we know to have it. He would want it to be with whoever was going to be. He didn't think that he was the rightful owner of it, but he did think that he was the cleverest person who should be able to decide who has it. So he will have passed it on to somebody else like that. Not necessarily, in fact, it appears quite clear he didn't pass it on to the next leader of the Golden Company. They haven't got it. There's no mention of them having it anywhere. This would be a huge thing for them to have. So I think that this has ended up, because there is a Blackfyre link there. This is, as I said, this is going to be a video. There is a Blackfyre link there across to Illyrio Mopatis, who is the person, hugely rich person, who is bankrolling this whole thing. He is the person who is behind all of this, along with Varys, who is sort of masterminding this entire plot. Now, he, I think, has got the sword Blackfyre, and he is going to send it over to Aegon as a way of trying to legitimize his claim. So this is a thing that they will probably do, is that they will try and show that he is an authentic Targaryen by giving him all of these different things. I've already talked about how symbolically it would be important it would be if the person claiming to be the Sword of the Morning joined his Kingsguard, because that would make it feel a little bit like it was under Aerys II. If he had the sword Blackfyre, then he would look like the king, because that was the king's sword. If he sat on the Iron Throne, he would look like the king. So all of this is very symbolic. That, I think, is what is going to be going on with Blackfyre, and I think in the Winds of Winter we will see it arrive and be put into the hands of Aegon. Lost for words. Thank you so much. £20. Hello. £20. I didn't see a question there, but thank you. That's very generous. Just having a quick flick through random questions. Okay, let's do one more, and then I'll take a moment just to let you know what's happening in the channel going forward. Maura Lee's asking about, this is over on Patreon, asking about how Euron might meet his end on land, at sea, who will be the one to kill him in the end. So I think that what will happen with Euron is roughly quite different, but roughly the same kind of thing that we saw on the show, in that he will team up with Cersei. He will, I suspect, the iteration, if I've already started saying that we get Aegon, who comes first, takes King's Landing. Then I think Daenerys will come in and takes the King's Landing. I think that she will then get distracted by the fight against the others. Cersei and Euron will then come back in, and I think they will be the final big baddies that everybody, after the battle against the others has happened, they are the final big baddies that have to be defeated. That, talked about it many times before, that kind of meets this idea about what George R. R. Martin says he wants the feel of the end of the story to be, which is like the scouring of the Shire in The Lord of the Rings. As I say, I've talked about that many times before, so I won't get into it again here, but it basically means there is a secondary baddie who has to be defeated after the big battle has happened. And I think that will be Euron. So I think we will find whoever is left over from the first, the dealings with the others, they will turn their attention back down, and I think that he will die in defense of King's Landing, not trying to defend Cersei. He will be the bigger and more important and crazier character actually out of those two, I suspect. So that is how it is. Exactly who kills him, I like the idea that this actually will be one of the Greyjoys, because if we're just trying to think character arcs, they kind of played up this Jaime rivalry with Euron, which certainly doesn't seem to be there so much in the books. In the books, the Jaime-Cersei relationship has broken down a lot more at that stage than it had on the show. They kind of kept those two together for a bit longer. So this Jaime being jealous of Euron thing isn't necessary there. I suppose that he could kill him just as a sort of a last thing when he's trying to get to Cersei right at the very end. But I think it would be more poetic for somebody who has been completely wronged by Euron, like a member of House Greyjoy, to be the person who ultimately kills him. Cassia Toths, thank you so much for the super chat, very generous, thank you, saying this is my first live stream with you, welcome. I love people who are coming here for the first time. Thank you for all you do. If I missed this in any content you've already done, apologies. What do you think of the 5 forts? And do you expect them to have any future significance? I haven't done a video on the 5 forts. For those who don't know, the 5 forts exist right over in the east of Essos. They're very mysterious. We only really read about them in the world of Ice and Fire, and then only briefly, but they are ancient. The hint is that they're magical. The hint is that they're defensive in some way. Now, will they have any future significance? I suspect actually not. I suspect that we may hear about them, but I certainly don't think we're going to see them in A Song of Ice and Fire. The action is going to be heading all the way over to Westeros. Yes, we've still got Dany dealing with stuff going on. She'll be in Slaver's Bay for a while. Meereen, she will be there for a bit longer. Apologies if you're not a big fan of the Meereen stuff, but she will be there for a bit more. But I don't think that we're going to see her or any of the other characters who are currently in Essos going further east to see what's going on there. So they're not actually going to appear. What they are, though, is a hint that the White Walkers perhaps didn't just come down the first time through Westeros. They also came down through Essos, through the other way. And this was a defensive line. Now, if that's the case, what we might start hearing about are the kinds of things that we hear about when we, in reference to the Long Night the first time, which was that this did impact on Essos. The River Royne froze over. The River Royne is massive. For that to freeze over is huge. So I think there's a very good chance that we might hear reference to what happens in Essos as winter starts coming into the world, not just in a kind of like a natural way, but in a magical way, a forced way. So I think that we may well hear about them, but I don't think they're going to play a specific role. I think that their main role thematically in terms of the story is to be hinting at this idea that it's not just Westeros. This is a whole world thing going on here. Layla Azmi Gushi, thank you so much for the super sticker. Thank you. I really appreciate that. That's very kind. Okay, let's take a brief moment just to, as I always do roughly halfway through my live streams, just to let you know stuff that's coming up. As I say, this is my last live stream of this year, of this decade, in fact. So I will be back in the new year, the first Thursday of the new year. I will be back live streaming again. I'm going to try and keep that going as a sort of a mix of sometimes solo live streams, open Q&A like this, and sometimes trying to get some guests on. I've got a few people in mind that I think will make fantastic guests. So really looking forward to that. In terms of what's happening over the next few weeks, I'm going to take a proper break off over Christmas, but there will still be a couple of videos coming out. I've got one, Lord of the Rings. We'll talk about Lord of the Rings in a moment. Sauron, a character study, which I've been really enjoying doing. Sauron, we often think of him as just being this kind of two-dimensional bad guy, but he's actually got layers. When you actually dig into it, we actually find a little bit more about his motivations, what he's trying to do, and it's not just destroy everything and be a big evil overlord. There's another layer going on there. So looking forward to that. I've also got quite a big video, I think, which is going to be about the crypts of Winterfell. Hopefully get that out over the sort of the Christmas period or possibly into the new year. That is looking at building, I think, on one of my favorite videos of mine that I did ages ago, which was about the crypts of Winterfell and the Horn of Winter. But it's actually what's going to happen. Who is going to, my theory there, if you've not seen that video, is that the Stark Dead will rise. The Stark Dead will come to fight against the others. But the question is who, how, what's going to happen? What does that look like? What does that mean? So that's the kind of questions that we're going to be tackling there, just sort of the second bit of what this defense mechanism in the Crypts of Winterfell is actually all about. In the new year, though, I am relaunching my second channel. I have a second channel, which is my audio narration channel, which I paused for a little while. If you're a patron, incidentally, if you're a patron of The Well Told Tale, thank you. I really appreciate you sticking with me while I've paused. So I will be giving some free gifts out for patrons of The Well Told Tale in the new year by way of a thank you, and also welcome to anyone who does want to join. But that's going to be relaunched with new content and also as a standalone podcast as well. So we're expanding out the different ways that you can consume that, not just on YouTube, but also as a podcast. So that's something to be looking forward to in the new year. And the other thing I would just say, as I always do, patrons, thank you so much. I honestly, I could not have got through this year doing what I do without your support. Thank you. I really, really appreciate it. For those who don't know about Patreon, I, many other content creators as well, have a Patreon page, and that is somewhere where you can go to access additional content from me. And I'm looking at ways to provide new and additional content for my patrons over the Christmas break. I'm going to have a think about that, what extra things I can be adding. So it's a way that you can either just, if you just want to support the channel, or if you want to get access to some extra stuff that I do just for my patrons. I'm going to be doing, for example, I'm going to do some special bonus editions of the Traveller's Guide just for my patrons in the new year, because I think that's just another way of thanking my patrons. If you're interested in that at all, there's a link down in the description, and I would really appreciate it. So thank you very much. Okay, let's get back to the questions. Oh, and Andrew K, yes, you're just asking about whether I would have a discussion stream on the Well Told Tale after I complete each book. Yeah, that's definitely something I'm looking into. I love the idea of when we finish a story, actually getting the people who've been reading through this with me just to have a chat about it. It would be, I'd love that. It would be fantastic. Okay, let's go back to some questions from Patreon. Henning J says, hi Robert, I guess many people, including me, hope that the Winds of Winter will finally be published in 2020. Yes, I'm not holding my breath, but yes, I'm hoping as well. In my opinion, what would be the biggest reveal or surprise of the book? And what do you think of the idea that Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring could be published together? George R. R. Martin wrapping it all up in one go. Okay, well, on that second bit there, George R. R. Martin, in replying to a suggestion that perhaps he's written or nearly written both books, came out very strongly and said, yes, he's most of the way through The Winds of Winter, but he's not yet started A Dream of Spring. So there will be a gap after The Winds of Winter. Of course, there will, before we get A Dream of Spring. My general feel is that when The Winds of Winter comes out, it will have to be split into two books. I think that is just, he's writing so much that I think that it will have to be published in 2 volumes. Simply because the binding won't work otherwise. But I think we'll be looking at like 1,500 pages on a softback and a paperback, and that simply does not work. So I think we'll get 2 volumes. The reason, incidentally, why I'm thinking it's going to be that bit, he's talked a bit before about manuscript pages he's been writing, but also when you just try and add up all the different storylines that do have to progress within The Winds of Winter, it very quickly adds up to a hugely long story, at least as long as the longest book that he's written so far, probably much longer. So I'm pretty sure it'll be in two different volumes. In terms of the biggest reveal or surprise of the book, well, I think we will probably see the equivalence of both the Hodor moment and the Shireen moment, which were when they were presented to the showrunners on TV, they considered those to be 2 massive moments. I think that they will be slightly less impact because we have seen them on TV, but they will be done in different circumstances. So I think that we will still be shocked by them, but because they're slightly different. So, for example, Shireen is not going to be, I predict, is not going to be, this is Stannis doing this in any way or sort of to blame for this. I think this will be Melisandre up in Castle Black, well away from Stannis and all the rest of it. She will, I personally suspect, burn Shireen in order to clear the way for Jon to head down to Winterfell. That, I think, is where it is, rather than to clear the way for Stannis to attack Winterfell. There being snow is a huge part of Stannis's plan for the Battle of Winterfell, so he will not want the snows to be melting. So I think we will get those things, but I think that the big surprise moments, I think that we may well get a chapter from the perspective of Ghost or Jon in Ghost. I think that would be fantastic. I think that the whole story of the Dornish plot will start to come out, and I think that will be huge because we will suddenly see what they've been doing all this time, and I think that is going to be something which a lot of people will be slightly taken aback by, quite how much George R. R. Martin has been seeding through all of these stories about what Dorne and the Martells have been up to. Fedra the Beloved says, hey Robert, hope you're doing well, thank you. Do you think once the books are published, HBO will make a new show about A Song of Ice and Fire, or an anime maybe? Or do you think it will not be adapted again? I don't think it will be adapted again for a while. I think that whatever you may think of season 8, and I think that most people have got quite a strong view on that now, that the series as a whole was undoubtedly very, very good. The acting, the music, the costumes, so much of it. The first 4 seasons, brilliant, definitely. The CGI, I think it would be very, very hard for them to redo it quickly afterwards, in the same way that it seems a bit with the Lord of the Rings films. Because they were so good, why would you want to try and redo those films again, that story again? Maybe give it a few decades or something, they may well do a new version, but there's no particular need to do that. So I don't think so. I think they're going to focus on successor shows like the spin-offs, like House of the Dragon, and things like that. I think that's where they're going to be going. Maura Lee says, on the show, Sandor made Arya rethink her wanting to complete her kill list by killing Cersei. How do you think this will play out in the books? Will Arya this time get to complete her kill list and kill Cersei, or do you think it'll just be Jaime in the end? Yeah, there's a lot of, I've speculated about who might kill Cersei. I think that, my best guess is still that it's going to be Jaime. Certainly the fact that they will die at the same time, that the amount of times they say versions of "we came into the world together, we will depart it together" is huge. I think that is very strong. In terms of Arya, she is a very dark character in the books and getting darker all the time. She will well, we don't know yet. The honest answer is we don't know yet what will happen with her sort of arc once she has left Braavos. Now, I think it's reasonably clear roughly what's going to happen is that she will she's not given up her Stark heritage in trying to become a faceless man, and eventually that will lead to her leaving the faceless men and trying to finish her kill list. She's been trying to do it while she's been in Braavos. So when she goes back to Westeros, it makes sense that she will carry on trying to finish off her kill list. Now, on the show, they tried to show her kind of softening, and eventually this all ended up with this point where Sandor does effectively say, do you want to end up like me? You can walk away. You don't have to be always just trying to kill somebody out of vengeance. And she did walk away. That was the end of her arc, effectively, that she decided, you know what, I'm not going to be that person. That whole training to be a deadly assassin, yes, I've learned the skills, but I'm not going to be the person who is sort of motivated by killing and death anymore. So that seems to be where they were going there. It's too early yet. We cannot tell yet whether or not that's going to happen in the books. It might, to a certain degree, happen, but she definitely will work her way through a lot more of that kill list. Of that, I'm pretty sure. Because even if she becomes more Starkish, she will still be wanting to be getting revenge on the people who, which is basically what the kill list is, on the people who have wronged House Stark, like Lady Stoneheart is, and also like her direwolf Nymeria is. Right, I think that's the end of my A Song of Ice and Fire questions from Patreon. I will move on. I've got some questions on Lord of the Rings, a bit on Westworld, and some other random things. So I'll just have a quick flick through the comment section here, see if there's any other questions coming up about A Song of Ice and Fire before we sort of move it on a little bit. Layla Asmi Gushi saying Sandor seems to be on a redemption arc in the books more than in the show. Yeah, so in the show he seems to be going on a redemption arc and then ended up just still trying to kill his brother at the end of it, so that didn't really work. So Darkstar wondering whether Melisandre will have points of view. We did have one point of view chapter from her perspective in the last book, wondering whether we will have more from her until Jon comes back, or if Tormund will get some. I mean, this is a good point, because the question is, whose perspective are we going to see events in Castle Black from? As I say, I think we will see Jon in Ghost, but then who else is it up in Castle Black? Davos isn't there. The other characters that we might think of as being up there, we haven't got any other point of view characters. So yeah, I think it's entirely possible we will get another one from Melisandre's perspective. I hope so, because the last one we had was really revealing, so I really do want that. So Tony3483 saying, what books should I read to get the background on the new Lord of the Rings show? Okay, let's move a little bit into Lord of the Rings here. So the Lord of the Rings show on Amazon, it's still probably at least 18 months away, and the amount of information we've got about it is limited. What we do know is that it's going to be based in the Second Age of Middle-earth, which means this is thousands of years before the stories we know about the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit and all the rest of it. And they seem to be hinting that it's going to be based at least partly on Numenor, which was this great island that you think of it as like a Atlantis kind of place, in the Golden Age before it drowned and descended into the sea. That is what Numenor is. There are some great stories around what's going on there, so I think there's a lot to choose from, but we haven't yet been told the detail of this. What we have got come from the appendices to the Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion, mostly. Now, I would say that you can, by all means, dive into them. That the Silmarillion is sort of like is not always the easiest of reads, it has to be said, but I would, it's well worth it if you're wanting to get into it. So if you've never come across Tolkien before, then The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings first, absolutely, just to get a feel for the world, and then dive into things like the Silmarillion. So talking on Lord of the Rings, Ali Al-Muhanna says, could Isildur, the ancestor of Aragorn, have resisted the One Ring and destroyed it? Now, for those who can remember the films, this was like, there was a big flashback right at the very beginning of the films when Sauron was defeated, and if you remember, the ring was cut from his finger, and you get the person who picked it up was this guy called Isildur, who was effectively the king. He was a Numenorian. He came from Numenor originally. He is the ancestor of Aragorn. He was there and he could have destroyed it. We saw it there. You remember Elrond saying, Isildur, throw the ring into the cracks of doom, and he doesn't. Isildur takes it, for himself. Now, the question is, could he have resisted it? Now, the One Ring, he didn't, is the short answer, because he wasn't strong enough. The One Ring is more powerful in two circumstances. Firstly, it is more powerful if it is held by a powerful person. Secondly, it is more powerful the closer it gets to its point of creation. So you see, for example, that it has more power over Frodo right at the very end. That's not Frodo just suddenly getting weak-willed. That's because the ring gets more powerful the closer it gets. So could he have? No, is the short answer. It was the wrong person who was doing it. I think that if Elrond had just taken him out and pushed him in, then that would have been the best way of going about doing it. But Elrond didn't do that. 26 Art Girl asks, in Lord of the Rings, what do you think is the backstory of Sméagol, who is Gollum? I think we've been told this largely. He was from a race of people who are very like the hobbits, and he discovered the ring. His friend did, and it was Sméagol's birthday, and the ring had great power over them, and so Sméagol killed his friend in order to get the ring. And then after that, we know what happened. He eventually, over time, turned into Gollum, and he descended under the Misty Mountains. So that is his backstory. I don't think there's any extra bits going on there. That is basically what it is. It's just that the ring chose that moment. The ring is not just a magical ring. The ring actually contains the essence of Sauron. We're told that he sort of poured himself into that ring. That's why it seems to almost have a character. And the ring chose that time to start to resurface. So it saw Sméagol as a way out from where it had been at the bottom of the river. Mindorgus Matulaitis, I hope that's how you pronounce it. Thank you so much for the super chat. My first for your great content. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. This is a Game of Thrones question saying, what do you think Bran saw in the Heart of Winter? Game of Thrones, Bran 3 or so. Yeah, so this is back in book 1. So Bran, he's effectively getting visions from Bloodraven, and Bloodraven's showing him, there's this big thing that you need to be dealing with. Bran doesn't really understand it. So I think he saw the others. I think that's what it was. I think that he saw that there was this great threat. I don't think he completely understood what was going on, but it was enough to sort of show him that there's another layer, there's something else which is going to be happening, something he needs to be heading towards. I think it's as simple as that. We get caught up, I said this slightly earlier in the stream, we get caught up, I think, often in thinking about, we know a lot about the White Walkers and all the rest of it. In the books, if the show had never happened, in the books, the White Walkers would still be a huge, or the others would still be a huge mystery, because we've been told so little about them. And so simply the fact that they are there is enough for Bran. That is all he needs to know, that they are there and there's a threat. I don't think that it's that he saw some sort of great mystery that will suddenly come back to, oh, I remember I saw this thing. No, I think that it's simply the fact that he saw the others and the threat that they were. Tony3483 saying, I found the unfinished Tales of J.R.R. Tolkien at my used bookstore. It has a section on the second page. Yeah, so there's Unfinished Tales. Yeah, is exactly what you think it is. It's a collection of stories, many of which he didn't quite get to the end of, just bits of legend, histories from Middle-earth. The Second Age, very broadly, is the period of Numenor, this period of Atlantis, when humanity, the elves are starting to decline, humanity is starting to come to power, and it's the age where Sauron is trying to take over the world and coming up with many complicated ploys and plots to do so. Brian Price, thank you for the super chat, saying, how do you characterize the difference between the worlds of A Song of Ice and Fire and Lord of the Rings? I think the big difference is in writing styles and or more precisely, chosen literary style, in that the world of J.R.R. Tolkien, Middle Earth, is objectively true in that world that we have, in the sense that the point of view we have is never questioned. That's actually what we're in Frodo's mind. We hear what Frodo's thinking. We're over with Sam, what he's feeling. These are things that we can't really doubt. When we get Aragorn singing songs or telling tales of deeds from centuries ago, we're not encouraged to think that these might be myths and aren't true. We're told that they are true. This is an accurate reflection of what happened. The myths and legends are history. They're fundamentally true. And we know this because there are characters who've survived all the way across. There is a God. God has created the world in this way. This is what has happened through history. This is the story. And we're invited to be a part of that. That is Tolkien's way of telling the story. George R. R. Martin's way of telling the story is to leave us always doubting and second guessing, because he never gives us an objective truth. Even the history books that he gives us are written from a certain perspective. We're encouraged to look at the world of Ice and Fire or Fire and Blood and doubt the details of what we're reading. Always be second guessing what this character, this maester, is actually trying to prove or say. All of the chapters of A Song of Ice and Fire and Dunk and Egg are from particular perspectives. We're never actually shown the exact truth about what's going on. And that's the big difference in the two worlds. One, we're being invited to see this as here's a true understanding of what's happening in this story. And this other one is, this is a collection of individual understandings of what is happening in this story. And we make the narrative up as we go through A Song of Ice and Fire. So that's the big difference between the two. It's quite a big literary difference between them. And I think it's a deliberate thing on George R. R. Martin to do it in a different style. Okay, let's, I think we'll go on for about 10 more minutes, maybe something like that. I've got a couple more questions I want to get at. Now is a good time to drop any more questions into the chat, and I will pick up on as many as I can. I did have one question about Westworld, again from Ali Al-Muhanna, saying, I wasn't impressed much by the original Westworld film or the show's first episode. Aside from AI gaining sentience and its implications, what is interesting about the story that wasn't explored in other shows or movies? Okay, so I love Westworld, and I think what they do is that firstly, it's very well written and it reveals the story as it goes along, and we are, it's expertly acted and expertly told. That's the first thing. But secondly, I would say that there is a layer of philosophical exploration that we see in this that is not just, so suddenly the robots are sentient, full stop. It's an exploration of what it means to be sentient. What does that imply in terms of rights? What does that imply in terms of how somebody's been treated in the past? If you treat a robot like that and then in a certain way and then the robot becomes sentient, does that suddenly make it different? What you've been doing, how does morality play into this? Philosophically, what is sentience? It tries to explore all of these different concepts as it's going through. So that for me is is what sets it apart. It's a lot more intelligently written, and it's a deliberate attempt to explore slightly higher ideas through this. And as I say, it's also incredibly well acted, and the storylines I find incredibly gripping as well. So it looks beautiful, and the music, Raman Jalili, who does the Game of Thrones music, also does it for this. And if anything, I think he does it even better in Westworld. Some of the I'm going to say cover versions, but then that's completely not doing it justice. He takes songs that we have in our culture and then adapts them for the world of Westworld in an absolutely brilliant way. So I would highly recommend that you try the first series and work your way through it. Helen's little sister saying, Robert, I'd love to know a bit more about how you got to where you are now, about hopes for the future of this platform and things like that. So, and that's a really good way as I'll pick up from a few more questions in this moment, but I thank you very much. I love the opportunity. I'm grateful for the opportunity to sort of talk about the vision, which I've talked a little bit about. I got into this about 3 years ago now. I wasn't necessarily expecting for this to be as big a thing as it has become in my life. I quite literally Googled how do you make a YouTube video and then went from there. My passion is explaining and exploring intelligently made TV and books, and that I think it came back from, and this is a slight digression, but it's my backstory, is that I can remember ages ago when, if you ever saw the show Sherlock, fantastic show. I can remember I was in an office at the time, and after an episode of Sherlock was on, I used to work with some really clever people. And after an episode, everyone would talk about it, but these very clever people would still go, "Oh, why did he decide to do that?" Or what was the clue? I think I missed a clue here. Or did anyone read the short story that this was based on? What was it? There were questions there for people who were wanting an extra layer of insight and analysis. And my passion for this channel is being able to provide that, and not talking down to people or just getting excited about things that look cool, but trying to say, okay, you're intelligent people, let's try and dig in. I will dig into the background here for you. I will try and explain the bits that maybe you missed, but not in a way which is in any way kind of talking down, because we all miss stuff which is going through. So I will put the legwork in, and I will hopefully be able to sort of add an extra layer onto our appreciation of great TV and great books. So that's my vision. I'm looking to expand that going forward. That is where I'm at. So I've been doing huge amounts about A Song of Ice and Fire. You already know I'm expanding out into doing Westworld. I'm looking to expand the amount of shows that I cover over the course of the next year or so. And then with my second channel, it's a passion project, really. I just love sharing great stories with people. I think stories are this fantastic medium that can bring people together, particularly speculative fiction, science fiction, fantasy. They can allow us to see our own world in a new way, and they can spur us to challenge what's going on in our world and our understanding of what's going on in our world, because that we have been shown something in a different way than we experience it. And I think that helps expand our mind, and I think hopefully also helps expand our understanding and love and appreciation for the world around us and the people around us. And if I can use that to be building I'm not building it, but I'm playing my small part in building a slightly more tolerant and loving world, then I think that would be absolutely fantastic. So that's my kind of vision, and that's where we're going to go with this. And we're just going to push forward. Just thinking about talking about engaging with great TV and books, and just see where this leads us. I wouldn't have expected 3 years ago to be where I am now, so I've no idea where we're going to be in 3 years, but I'm loving having everyone coming along with me. It's been fantastic so far. So thank you for that, Hannah's little sister. I hope that was helpful. Just quickly dip into the chat just to see if we've got any more questions. Shamanka Angel Heart, could you briefly talk about where you found about fair use policy, please? Yeah, this varies country to country. I would highly recommend that you well, Google it, but obviously go to well-sourced things depending on what's in your country. Basically, most countries have got a concept of fair use of original material, as long as you're providing a commentary on it, as long as you're not claiming that it is your original material, as long as you are reformatting it and using it for a new way, then it is fair use for you to be using pictures or quotes or all the rest of it, as long as it doesn't go on for too long. I could not quote the entirety of A Song of Ice and Fire or claim I was just quoting it. That would be me using George R. R. Martin's words. I cannot show a hugely long clip of Game of Thrones because that belongs to HBO, but I can use short quotes from George R. R. Martin, and I can use short clips or still pictures from the show, as long as I'm adding value to them and all the rest of it. I'm not a lawyer, so don't take any of that as being absolute truth. Look into it for yourself. That's the broad sense of it, though. Will Moss saying, I don't think there will be a young Aragorn because they're contractually obliged to keep it in the Second Age, thousands of years before Aragorn. Might be wrong, but think not. Yeah, so that you're right. As it stands, there are rumors that Amazon are trying to be buying rights for the Third Age as well, but they are just rumors. As it stands, they only have the rights to the Second Age. And their rights are very clear. Tolkien's estate are very, very strict on this. If they touch on the stuff that Tolkien wrote about, they have to do it exactly right. They can't deviate away from it in the way that Game of Thrones sometimes deviated away from the original source material. They have to do it. If they're just basing it in the Second Age in a bit that Tolkien didn't write about, then they can go wild, as long as they remain consistent with the rest of the wider Tolkien world. So that's what they've got in their sort of contract. That does mean that, as it stands, the characters that we know, most of the characters that we know from the Third Age, from Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, they will not be appearing. So Aragorn will not be appearing. We might see people like some of the elves. We might see Galadriel. Elrond may well make an appearance. Who knows? Sauron obviously is around there as well. There's a few other possibilities. Tom Bombadil, they won't show Tom Bombadil, but he was around as well. The Blue Wizards may well have been around, if you want to get really nerdy about this. But most of the main characters we know will not. Donald Peoples, or possibly Donnell Peoples, never know how to pronounce it. Apologies, Donald. I greatly appreciate your content and the obvious work you put in. Perhaps we'll get a live stream with Cloaked Robert from the old days of IDG. Aha, maybe one day. For those who weren't around for the first few months, my little avatar was a picture of me in a cowl. So maybe that will resurface at some point. But thank you so much for the super chat. 26 Art Girl wondering what that was about. I just liked it. There's no greater story to it than that. The hood has to resurface. It will at some point. Everyone's asking for it now. It will come back at some point. I will show you. I will surprise you with it. People talk about The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian, it's not out here. Disney Channel hasn't launched in the UK yet. I've not seen it, but I've heard good things about it. When it does arrive here, then I will happily watch it. I'm not currently planning on covering it. Have a quick flick through. Carl Karsnark talking about Lord of the Rings, saying on March the 7th, they tweeted saying, "Welcome to the Second Age," confirming the time period the television show will be set in. Yeah, that's pretty much all we have. The Twitter account has not got much on it. There's an interesting little video on there about who's doing the writing and all the rest of it, but it's been really quite quiet. Think I will probably call it a day. Old Pipe saying, "Thanks for the live stream, Robert. Love your content. I'm going to be all over your like buttons." Thank you so much. Okay, well, I will call that one a day there, guys. So this is my last live stream of the year. Thank you so much for supporting this channel through this year. I really appreciate it. The channel will be, there will be some things appearing over the next few days over the Christmas period, so do keep an eye out for that. But proper relaunch, everything happening again in January, which I'm really looking forward to. In terms of if you're watching this not live but a little bit later, a little bit in a moment, somewhere around here will appear a link to other live streams I've been doing before, if you're interested in watching a few more of them. Somewhere around here will be appearing a link to my Patreon page if you'd like to support the channel or get access to some of the things I do just for my patrons. Please do click on that link. Thank you, everyone, for a fantastic year. I'm looking forward to coming back in 2020 refreshed with a whole load of new expanded content for you. Take care, everyone, and I will see you soon.